Okay, baby.
My gosh, we have not even gone on record yet, and I've had such a laugh with Ben. But before we get into the topics here, Ben, please tell everyone that's going to be listening to this, who are you, please?
Who am I or what have I done? I mean, those are two different questions.
Well, the question is specifically, who are you?
I'll
And
tell you
it's
what,
open to you to
I,
answer
I, I tell
exactly
you,
as you want to.
I tell you who I am in terms of what I've done. Uh, my name is Ben Chai. I'm known as the Doctor Who of business because of the unusual perspectives I have on life and how to get around very challenging problems. I obviously didn't start out like that. I started out as a young man with no direction who slept on the floor of a friend's. It was his student accommodation with probably 5 or 6 other people because I didn't have any money,
Mhm.
and I started out in just eating porridge and cornflakes for lunch and dinner. From there, I thought, I really need to get out of this pool of horribleness, you know? And so I developed and learnt and grew myself technically, and also mentally and spiritually to really understand life and how to transform your dreams into a reality.
So there we are with those two words, right? The D and R words, dreams and reality. So you wrote a book, Social Magnetism, and I studied a master's degree in managing virtual teams in completely virtual environments in 2002. Ever since then, that's been my topic that I've continued exploring. And you did an amazing TEDx talk, which we'll link in this comments of this in the description of this talk, so people can view your TEDx talk about social magnetism. You're also coming from the software engineering background, which is quite fantastic considering that software seems to be eating the world. How does social magnetism work in the virtual world? What's kind of the first thing you would say to somebody who is not magnetized yet?
So social magnetism is all about connecting people and connecting people at a deeper level than just say, hey, Jason, how are you? You say, hi, I'm well. How are you, Ben? I'm well. And that's it, kind of very superficial discussion, rather than really getting to know who you are and whether you'd make a good friend or a good supporter or a good business partner, or just someone who you can do business with and not get ripped off in some way. So that's the whole connection business. Now, obviously, with many challenges, such as like the expense of travel. For example, if you are in another country and I'd have to travel over to you, or situations where epidemics are happening and people are now locked into their own countries, software has allowed us to connect virtually over the internet with the massive progress since 2000 on the speed of connectivity. And here we have that, which is what social magnetism is about. It's connecting at a deep level. And so now I have this opportunity to connect with people like yourselves, Jason, and think, how can I use kind of like the physical way of connecting with people, and how can I now put it into the, if you like, the ether, the internet, or via the software, such as Zoom, such as Microsoft SharePoint, such as Google Hangout. So many different kinds of software today allow us to really connect. But they're just the platform. We have to know how I can add value to you. And also I need to know in myself if you're the right person I even want to connect with. And I can do that by my interaction with you over the software connectivity that we have.
So how do you know that you've established connection with someone? Is there like a feeling to it? Is there some sort of social signal to it? What's your way of understanding that?
I've got a feeling. And tonight's going to be a great night. This podcast is going to be a great podcast.
This is going viral, baby.
So that's a really great question. How do I know whether I've got a deep connection with you via a virtual connection? Well, you don't really know, even from
even in a physical,
even a physical world. You don't really know until you have a disaster, and then you know who your true friends are. So in the physical world, I used to think of situations where I could ask potential friends to come and help me, and they could say, no, I'm too busy, or they could say, I'm too busy, do you have another time? Or they could say, I'm too busy, but on Friday and Saturday next week I'm free, or I can arrange for some friends to come and help you. Now, each one of those answers tells me whether you're there for me. So how do I do that socially over the internet? Well, I have a number of situations due to an epidemic where there are people in need. So they have asked me for money. And I have this belief that I should never give people money, ever. So what I've done with several of them is say, well, I can't just give you money, but I can create a framework where you can earn some money, by doing stuff for me. Now they're very simple things, and I've sent them some money if they carry out the tasks that I've asked them to do. Then brilliant. If they don't, brilliant. But at least I've created that contract, and now I can see whether they deliver on that contract. Does that make sense?
Totally. And then if they do, then that's establishing a connection. Is that what you're saying?
That's established a connection. Certainly it's kind of one way, but at least I know I can, whether I can trust them if we were ever to do things at a deeper level in the future.
Yeah. So talk to me about trust, because so many people have asked me to do a video about trust and what trust is, how one establishes trust, and so on.
Yeah.
And I've literally had to sit and introspect and meditate on this, and then start writing and rewriting and rethinking. But I'm going to shortcut this by just asking you and then rewriting that.
So a while ago, I wrote a book for Microsoft called Migrating from Windows NT 4 to Windows 2000, which is
I'm going to have to insert a clapping, over, audio that goes, yeah,
yay me. Well, that alone, how I got to write the book is a little story. But in the old way of, because you mentioned software and connectivity and how you want to integrate it with social magnetism. So in the Windows NT days, we had ways of connecting different networks together via trusts. And there were several kinds of trusts. There was what we call a one-way trust. In other words, I trust Jason, but Jason doesn't necessarily trust Ben. We had what we called a transitive trust. I trust Jason. Jason trusts Jessica. So I trust Jessica because every friend of Jason, is a friend of mine. Yeah, he trusts them. They are solid people, they're professional people, so I trust them. And we had bi-directional trusts. So if I trust Jason, Jason trusts me. Yeah. Now, this is in the tech world. Yeah. I could say if Amazon trusts Google and Google trusts Microsoft, then Amazon will trust Microsoft. And if Google, so that would be a transitive. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. Now, if we can take those technical ways of trusting and apply it to our world, which I've already said, then we can see various things happening. Now, in the tech world, if I trust you, it means that you can come to my network and you can change my passwords and usernames and so on.
This is why I find software engineering as a very powerful way to actually also reverse engineer understanding about the world, because a lot of great software is actually based around the established structures and standards that exist within the world of social realms, right? So there's some sort of transposition that goes from social realms. My profession is user experience design. I'm getting users to use tech and sort of translating that.
Sure.
So
when I trust you to change my usernames and passwords, this is an amazing kind of responsibility I've given you. And if you abuse that trust, in other words, you could lock all my users out, then obviously I will probably tell everybody about you and who you are and what you did to me. For me to get to trust you to change my usernames and passwords in the tech world, you would need to meet certain criteria. So in for example, the tech world, where we have kind of like the cloud situation where people are storing data, I have to have a user agreement with you, some kind of contract, that if you break that contract, then I have some financial kind of like, you've broken the contract, so you need to remunerate me like this. I have to have a belief in your technical way of dealing with aspects. Because you are working with my users, you also have to show ability in connecting with people and giving them value. And also, the people that work for you also have to pass that criteria. And you need to have an understanding of security, so that when your people change our username's password, for example, they can't put a password that is easy to break. And they need to communicate as well to my users that they have changed the password, so that the user doesn't come in the morning and get very frustrated because nobody's told them that their password is trusted. Now, if we take this into the real world, for me to trust you, and we have different levels of trust, just like we have in tech, yeah? So I can have superficial trust with you. If you've said, like, you're going to get me a drink, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I do, and what many people do, is they slowly trust people with more and more of their kind of requests, if you like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to call them requests. And the more that you deliver on those requests, the more likely I'm to trust you at deeper levels.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah, totally. Right. And to me, it makes perfect sense. And to me, that's exactly where also I'm notionally writing this article that's called Trust is a Dynamic Variable. In other words, I might trust you now, as in you're doing lots of stuff, but then suddenly at some point you drop off. It's like you're no longer doing stuff. It means go like, okay, well, he's not doing stuff, but it's not to say that forever I don't trust you. It means that you can grow back into the trust network if you start picking back up with those transactional truths.
I think it's like riding a bicycle, actually, in some ways. So if you if you stop riding a bike and then you start riding again, obviously a little bit wobbly, but then you get into the groove again, and you think, oh well, that's it. And in a similar way with trust, Jason, if you've never broken my trust, if you've always delivered in what you said you are going to do, or if you aren't going to do what you said you're going to do, but you let me know in advance, then I've had a situation because of an epidemic. I've had to go to sort out a funeral. So I can't deliver something for you, but I can deliver it here, or I can do X, Y, Z. I know that you're a straight professional.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I
Shit
perhaps
happens, basically. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But if we don't do anything for a couple of years, that's fine. If I see you again and we bump into each other, I know that from the past, my past record with you,
yeah.
that you've always delivered. Now, you could have become a totally different person. You could break my trust at that point. But from my perspective, Jason, you've always been a solid guy. Why would I want to change that dynamic? And if you have introduced me to other solid people, then after a while, I'll just think, Jason has recommended this person. So I don't need to worry about their professionality. I don't need to worry about whether they're just all hype and super positive, but have no substance behind them. In the property world and the tech world, I get recommendations all the time from different people. I don't always listen to those recommendations if the person making the recommendation has never delivered on their promises and what they've told me. But the ones that have introduced us to fantastic people. So recently we've been introduced to an amazing solicitor, an amazing builder by the same person. I'm going to trust not only that person, but everybody else he introduces to our business.
Yeah.
And that's that transitive trust now that we're talking about. Now, if for some reason you have a requirement to use my skill set instead of just having a one-way trust, and I always deliver to your satisfaction, and I exceed that satisfaction, and I introduce you to other people, then again, you will have that over time, that Ben's a solid guy. He's introduced me to great people. They've always let me know in advance. They've always had great communication, which is actually what social magnetism is all about. Great communication. Sounds so simple, but actually, you're smiling and laughing. But in actual, it's very difficult. And we have pulled out of so many people's deals because of the lack of communication and letting us know what's going on.
The reason why I laugh is because sometimes you get all this kind of management consultants, right? They come in and they say like, it's about great communication, right? As though that's like a solution to like communication is such a complicated thing, essentially.
It is, and the implementation of great communication is very difficult because you've got cultural challenges, you've got age challenges. Sometimes you have to deal with gender challenges. So many challenges in there. You've also got different tech that people are used to communicating on.
Yeah.
For example, I don't like communicating via text. I just don't like it. I would rather pick up the phone, sort out when we're meeting, rather than having 10 texts to find out a date, time, all that, all that. Whereas other people prefer it. So communication, very challenging. And also, I might tell you, and I've made this assumption that you're going to tell Jessica, but you don't. So then Jessica gets annoyed with me because I didn't inform her, but I made that assumption. So you're absolutely right. Great communication sounds like a wonderful thing, but the actual implementation takes a little time. And it also takes that thing we mentioned earlier called trust.
So I feel like I'm speaking here to a super human intelligence And so I'm just going through like all sorts of questions that I could be asking here and trying to spin something really tricky at you to see how you handle it. So let's
Ooh, you're a
try.
tricky spinner.
Yes, let's try. Let's try this one. What is the role of spirituality in human communication through digital media?
Yeah, so that's a really long sentence. So are you trying to say, how do you communicate spiritual values through the internet?
So let's say, for example, I asked you a beginning question, who are you? And
Mm.
you answered it from the doing
From
perspective.
the doing perspective, yes.
It's what you do, but it's not
Because
who
I
you
think
are.
trying to explain it from a reality perspective, who the 5 million trillion little microbes or whatever it is that I'm made of, protons, is too challenging. So I think more people, when you ask them who you are, they prefer the different labels.
Yeah. And that's why I asked that question first, because usually people I'm not interviewing, but having a chat with is I'm talking to them for the first time, like you. So it's quite fantastic way of actually establishing common, ground.
Common ground.
Uh,
Have you seen Anger Management? Yeah, with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson.
yeah, and I keep wanting to rewatch that. There's also Analyze This and Analyze That, which is similar kind of
Sure,
movie.
but in that film where Jack Nicholson is asking Adam Sandler this question, who are you? So he tells him what he does. No, I didn't ask you what you do. I asked you who you. Do you remember that scenario?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and I've always wondered, how anybody could ever answer that question,
Mm-hmm.
because of our perspectives of how people interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly in the UK, if somebody asked me, how are you? They don't really want to know
No,
how I am
no.
until perhaps at a later stage, until we get deeper. So when they say, who are you? It's just like, what do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, and that's why I asked that, because it's breaking that social standard. It's borderline rude, right?
I don't find it rude at all, Jason.
But in England,
I,
like
I and
if I was to ask my next door neighbor, who are you? They'll go, how dare you ask me that question?
so here's an interesting thing, Jason. I actually get asked, who are you, so many times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably if I was out networking, it would come up 2 or 3 times during an event.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason it occurs is because I don't actually tell people much about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I give them a label,
Mm-hmm.
author.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, and then they find out that I actually have performed around the world in dance.
Mm-hmm.
Or then they hear that I've been in films, or I've run multiple businesses, and then suddenly it comes out like, who are you? When I first met you, you just sounded like this bumbling idiot. Do you remember when you asked to be my friend on Facebook, and I just started putting random stuff on your posts?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that. But who is
Yeah.
this guy who doesn't seem to have much knowledge about anything, but comes out with these weird comments?
Yeah. So this is what I'm trying to get to, which is that, is there like an essence to a person? And let's say call that essence their spirit, their being.
Their spirit, their soul. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if that essence is ever present, never changing, then how can we establish the social magnetic connection on that essential level through technology? That's my
Sure.
question.
Sure. Have you ever meditated with someone on Zoom, or prayed with someone using Zoom or Google Hangout, whatever it is, StreamYard, Party?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah.
So when you take part in that kind of communication, or if I have a 5-minute silence with you, just looking at your eyes in Zoom, we're connecting now at a very, very different level from our verbal communication. And if we're using one of these video streaming pieces of software through that visual, we're now creating a more spiritual, if you like, component and dynamic to the way we communicate.
Mm-hmm. And is that spiritual component, how do you see that? Is that essential or non-essential?
In terms of deep connection,
Mm-hmm.
So the question you're asking is more about awareness. So if people are aware that they have a spiritual aspect, then you can connect at a spiritual aspect. If they're
Mm-hmm.
not aware of it, you can connect with it, but they're not really sure what's happening. Do you understand what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So from my perspective, I believe that if you understand a lot of the spiritual aspects of the physical world, you actually have resolved many problems and accelerated your growth within.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have in terms of who you are. So coming back to that question again, you have your mental self, you have your physical self,
Mm-hmm.
you have your if you like, just to make this a worldly aspect, a business or career or financial self.
Mm-hmm.
You have your relation self, so how you relate to people and the world around you, and you have your spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
The weakest aspect of many people today, in fact, it is kind of a lost art, is that spiritual aspect. And
Mm-hmm.
that spiritual aspect is actually the foundation for many people if they want to have accelerated growth and if they want to understand why shit happens to them.
It's we said this before I hit the record button, and we're still just riffing, and asked you facetious question, are you enlightened? And we sort of riffed on it, and I feel a little bit bad that we didn't record that bit, but then I said something like enlightenment without purpose is a little bit you know so I feel that like spiritual aspect gives people that purpose angle to life that otherwise may not exist in kind of perhaps full self-realization, where it's like, well, I'm sort of everything and nothing, and what now?
I think it's very, I think the spiritual foundations gives you the opportunity to be any person you want to be, and provides you the foundation, but I don't think it gives you the direction of where your life is going to go. There are very few people I know who at the age of 5, 6 thought, I'm going to be a this, or even the age of 10 or 15. The ones that I know that did know who they wanted to be, what they wanted to do, have been remarkably successful and happy in their
Mm-hmm.
lives. One of my friends always wanted to be a teacher, became a teacher, was asked to be head of department. No, I just want to teach. Was asked to be headmaster. No, I just want to teach. Retired a teacher, very happy person. Not many people are like that. And
Mm-hmm.
for example, myself, I don't believe I really discovered my purpose till very late in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of us, we whether we're spiritual or not, we kind of, and I think this is life. We kind of meander. Okay, I'll try this, see whether it resonates with
Mm-hmm.
me. Maybe it's resonated with me for 3 or 4 years, and then I think, wow, maybe it's not so great. And we go through life having these different experiences until one day we just think, you know what? I really like doing this, and this is all I ever want to do, and this is going to be my purpose. This is going to be the value I'm going to give to everyone on this planet.
So, Ben, you strike me as an incredibly self-developed person in actually quite different dimensions. You mentioned them: spirituality, physical, social, cognitive, all this kind of stuff. How did you manage to do this? How much effort, energy, consistency has this taken? Because, you know, I look at you and I'm like, when I grow up, I want to be more like Ben.
Oh, and I thought when I grow up, I want to be more like Jason.
Hey, I'm still a tiny little Smurf. I'm
Well,
still in Smurf mode.
Understanding spirituality, you'd understand the dimensions in time, and you're probably aware that the past, present, and future are all happening at the same time.
Integral now, yes.
So you know, I could be talking with your older self,
Mm-hmm.
just playing with you a little bit, as
Mm-hmm.
you seem to enjoy playing with me. I again, that is everybody's journey, and everyone's is different. I love Wayne Dyer's kind of a lot of his teachings, and if you see when he first started out, his story changed until the time he died, when it was a very, very different story. As he grew in his own intellectual understanding, his physical understanding, and obviously his spiritual understanding, which he really studied many different people, and he tried to kind of distill all the different philosophers, all the different kind of religions, and try to find that commonality between them. So you see him constantly quoting from other people's works to try that. And I think everybody has that journey depending on who they're supposed to be. For me, you know, it started out with being bullied a lot. And perhaps it started even, you know, if I speak to some people, it started out in my mother's womb. Right? Yeah.
Pre-birth trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, that exactly. I just think it's more than a woo, man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My stupid jokes.
No, it's I'm laughing internally. It's kind of like some things are like funny, serious. It's weird, right? So yeah, I'm laughing internally to that one because
how dare you laugh internally, Jason?
I know. It's like don't hold the laugh back.
Yeah, my goodness, you fooled me there. So I think everyone's perspectives are different, and I got to a point in my life where I was very suicidal, and not very good at understanding suicide and how to do it, unfortunately, or fortunately, for myself and perhaps other people who've benefited from my life on this planet. So there was that point where I was trying to seek something else, and perhaps that point took me on the spiritual journey, the spiritual aspects. Now, even though I'd learned a lot from the spiritual world, I was still sleeping on someone's floor. So even though I gained perhaps a lot of wisdom in life, I then had to
apply that stuff.
Work out how to now transform my own reality and my dreams, my current reality, into the future reality. Turn my dreams into reality now. So that's when I started on not just the spiritual aspects of understanding, you know, great works such as the Bible, but I would also then move on to understanding, you know, the financial world, and start learning aspects of business from people like Brian Tracy or Earl Nightingale from the Conant Nightingales series. So now I was understanding the financial world and how that integrates with the spiritual world. and I was growing intellectually as well as spiritually in understanding different ways to create income, to build, to transform my reality, my dreams into that reality. Because all your dreams will either cost money or they will cost relationships. So you have to develop, back to social magnetism and connecting on the internet. You see, you don't need money to have that dream life. You just have to have great connections.
Mm-hmm.
Either will do.
Mm-hmm.
There is someone who recently said, Ben, I just want you to come and live. I've got all this land. I will build your own place for you. I'm going to build a place for my mom. I'm going to build a place for myself. So, I said, what does it cost? Nothing. You've just given me in my life so much value and people around. I would just like to do that for you. So you don't actually need finance. Although I love teaching people about finance because it's easier. But I also teach people both finance and social magnetism.
Yeah. And there's certainly the notion of social capital, right? That's
well,
very,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Let's change social magnetism. And once you've got massive connection and attraction, that turns into, as you rightly say, social capital.
Yeah. I did this kind of prods. It doesn't matter. I did a talk which is about future of money, and I concluded money in future is love. Money is love. It's kind of interesting sort of derivative there. But so the notion of coming to suicidal thoughts, like, I mean, why? Yeah, I've been there myself like 3 years ago as well. But like, why did you? How come you got there? Like, what led to that?
It's just lack of self-value. I was bullied a lot. I was told how ugly I was, and when you're bullied, you self-isolate, which now everyone's doing today.
Yeah.
And when you're isolated, you become a bigger target. As a result of being self-isolated, you don't learn communication. You don't
How
learn
to
how to
riff with
socialize.
people.
So now you're a weirdo, and more people will pick on you. So you create this kind of like circle of, what do you call it?
Spiral.
Yeah, downward spiral.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's how I personally got there. Other people get there because their self-worth is based on, for example, their job or the amount of money they have, or some external aspect, rather than understanding that they are a diamond. They're unique. Everyone is a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. They may have a few punctured tires, so that's why they don't work, or their engine's screwed up. But if they can understand that they are just wonderful, beautiful people internally, and stop this kind of internal talk when I say you're special, and they're saying, no, but you really are special, Ben. No, everybody is special in their own way. You just have to find that way that you are unique and special.
That essence, that we mentioned.
Essence.
Yeah. And so, I mean, usually I don't ask people too much about their story, because it's kind of like discussing mostly the events and stuff like that, which, I go with this kind of idea that great people discuss ideas, but in your situation, I'll make a little bit of exception, because how did you end up at Microsoft and also writing a book about wonderful and our beloved Windows NT?
I mean, you're really dating me by talking about Windows NT.
Hey, it's on the book. It's on the book. It's on the cover.
I tried to be eternally useful.
But I remember using that stuff, man. That stuff was like the stuff that kind of worked from Microsoft, that stood up, that didn't crash. Yeah.
So how did I end up doing that? So my degree was in maths and computer science. I started out as a admin, procurement in one of the first PC companies, and from there I just grew in my understanding of software until one day I was deploying tech to banks, oil companies, and then I ended up educating people because they wanted to know how come I was able to do certain things that other people couldn't. So I ended up being a teacher and teaching, a lot of software around the world. Because I've always been in media, I also ended up in teaching media. And then as I've built with teams of people, lots of different businesses which have done very well, I ended up teaching business and then social magnetism, which is probably where I am today. I'd rather teach business than software.
But now
that's how I ended up at Microsoft anyway. Just because I was good at the stuff,
Yeah, and like I mean, you strike me. The other thing that strikes me about you is that you're very eloquent as well. Is that like something that you've been consciously developing in yourself, or have you always been gifted by as the English people say, gift of the gab? Have you always had that gift of the gab?
So I think the gift of the gab, that phrase has many different connotations. It could be for sales, it could be for talking from stage, it could be for explaining aspects. From my perspective, I feel that I'm not naturally talented at many things. So I take the long way round. I make all the mistakes, and I'm able to translate and simplify, as a result of making those mistakes, how to do things to other people. So for example, if you ask me about memory management, I would just talk about how that works in terms of making some curry, a curry dish. And I think it's because I've had to learn the hard way that has helped me to break down complex subjects into easy to understand and digestible aspects. I remember a guy coming up to me, he says, Ben, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm cleverer than you. And I don't understand why students and people connect with you much better. So in the Microsoft educational world, you get rated on your delivery of education, and I'm normally for several years I was the top educator out of 500 to 1,000 people. It doesn't really matter. And it was really simple. When I watched him, I said, the challenge you've got is you're giving people too much information. It's like you're trying to prove how knowledgeable you are. If you just take it back and give them what they need, and that's where I say, make it digestible. Rather than giving them too much so that they're overloaded. Even if you could explain it well, they're still overloaded.
Yeah, exactly. And I came across this term recently. It's a term called simplexity. The blend between simplicity and complexity. And it seems to be like the entire purpose of UX design, given simple access to complex systems in some sense.
And coming to your simplexity, on the advanced education, I would normally tell my students, I want you to know and understand that on the basic courses, we lied to you.
Yeah.
We lied to you too, because we needed you to get to a certain level of understanding, so that now we can teach you the advanced aspects. It's the same like in business, for example, the whole subject of sales. I will just, if people are new and they hate sales or they have an issue with it, I would just break it down into some very simple components where they don't feel like they're selling.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to deeper aspects like funnels and back to your software and having giveaways and all those other aspects. But I don't want that. All I want them to know is how to use social magnetism to connect with someone, to keep adding value, so that it's just it's very hard for them not to say, what do you do and how can I buy something of whatever you're doing because I like you so much?
Yeah, yeah. So here is a fascinating thing. You know, we're speaking for the first time, and although I've seen your TED talk and all that kind of stuff, you know, I don't know who you are. And one of the contemplations that I've had is that I've come to sort of a conclusion that I'll never really know anybody fully, because people are that kind of complex on the complexity and the exity side of the complexity. But one of the things I'm hearing here is that you've got background in mathematics, which I also studied. I was a great mathematician, still kind of am in some sense, although I haven't really continued my studies.
I've evolved from being a mathematician to a mathemagician.
Yeah, okay. I'm cooking up a question here.
Oh,
but,
you
but
cooker, you also a chef.
I'm a question chef. And then we're also done a lot of work in computer science, and then user experience design is really about social aspects and psychology and actually getting people to use technology and all that kind of stuff. And then business, I study business studies, business management, all that stuff. So there seems to be a lot of overlap in between you and I and our kind of journeys. We've both got suicidal, we're spiritual, all this kind of stuff. You know, we both like Wayne Dyer and see that his story has evolved over time, which is great. And so talk to me about how you reconcile maths with spirituality, because there's a whole bunch of scientists who are like radical atheists and a whole bunch of spiritualists who are like, well, science is all BS, right? Whereas I'm very much like science, great. Spirituality, great. Social stuff, great. Business, great. So talk to me about how you reconcile maths and spirituality together.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to, because you said so much stuff there, I'd like to come back to a few of the things, and then I'll come back to mathematics and spirituality. First of all, I love the fact that you've come to the conclusion that you will never, ever really get to know somebody. It's a challenge that I often face, where people say to me, I've known you for 5-10 years and I still don't really know you. And I think that's right. Why should you ever know somebody to their core? We're constantly evolving. If you're if a person, you're kind of an individual who likes to grow. So who you are today is not going to be who you were yesterday, even if it's only a 0.5% change. Yeah, or a 1/4%. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. You're never going to be that person. So that's why, you know, there are some iconic people, who I feel are iconic, no matter how they got there. Madonna is one of them. I think she, you see her doing this thing and then this thing. You know, one day she wanted to be an actress. She failed. I was in one of her films that was a total flop. But one day she did Evita. And she was amazing in it, and I think she thought, that's it, I'm going to quit now. But we constantly grow, and we challenge ourselves to be different people. So you can never ever get to know someone. Right, now back to your question about mathematics or science and spirituality. I believe that there are actually a lot of scientists, many scientists, who are spiritual, just as there are many scientists who are I don't think there's any such thing as atheism. I always think atheism is a religion in itself. And I remember having a great argument with someone. I said, well, why is it you're constantly trying to tell me that God doesn't exist? Aren't you trying to proselytize me? Because I've never told you about God or the universe, but you keep telling me, because you kind of know a little bit about me, why atheism is great. And isn't a religion, to use that term religion, isn't that something where people tries to convert you to their belief system? So first of all, I think anyone who is an atheist is religious, because they're trying to tell you. If they didn't, just never got into the discussion, fine, I get that.
There is actually Church of Atheism in
There you
Islington and
go.
London. In London,
And,
literally.
well, if you look at Wiki now, from their perspective, atheism is a religion.
Yeah.
So you get scientists or mathematicians of all different kinds. Now, spirituality, I think, is a set of rules based on patterns of the way the universe works. And I think that's what mathematics is. Mathematics is purely patterns. And if you can see patterns in the universe, if you can see patterns in the way people can communicate, you will be able to detect if somebody is likely to be honest to you, or if they're likely to be betray you in some area. Maybe they'll steal your life partner, or they'll break you financially.
Mm-hmm.
Just by looking at those patterns. Now, I'm not saying you're always going to be correct, but you can at least bias your life to be happier and not have, some of these tragedies happen to you. This is where we come on to making your own luck, really. And by making your own luck, you've now seen patterns, life patterns. And that's what mathematics is about, just seeing patterns. If you look at the Fibonacci series, if you look at the way petals are made and so on, then it's all patterns. Music, patterns of notes.
Yeah, designed and discovered by a mathematician as well. So yeah, and Bach's compositions that are literally symmetrical. You can play them backwards and forwards.
Yeah. I thought he was a dog. That's why they called him Bach.
Yeah. Reverse engineering. Reverse engineering doesn't always work that way. But there's I'm not sure if you've seen a TED talk around maths is empathy. Because each mathematical formula is showing that the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side, and they're two different expressions of the same thing. That's the nature of the equal sign. And so
when you say left-hand side and right-hand side, what do we...
in an equation, this equals that. And so, I don't know, 2 plus x equals 4.
Plus y.
Yeah. And it's just two perspectives on the same thing. And so integrating and unifying those perspectives, now I'm kind of getting into the whole integral theory, which I'd love to ask you a question around whether you've heard it, practiced anything from it, or utilized it in any way, shape, or form. The idea that universe is made out of perspectives, and that unifying and discovering more perspectives and integrating them into your entire sort of mental view of the world helps you actually grow in a way that is sustainable and kind of really, dare I say, the coolest way to do. Any comments?
I think you're talking about prerequisite variety. With prerequisite variety, I might be saying the phrase incorrectly, but it's the person with the most abilities to change in a situation is more likely to survive in any situation. If you have only one way of behaving, whereas then you're less likely to survive compared to someone who has a variety of kind of reactions or actions that they could take. So when you ask me that question, I could just say, well, actually, I've never thought about it. That's one way for me dealing it. I could give you the answer I've just given you. I could just be angry. I could say, Jason, how dare you ask me that question? What on earth is going on in your mind? So when you have lots of different people's perspectives, then you can connect better with people who have a specific stance, which will allow you to survive in that community. I guess one unique aspect for myself was at university, I was a member of so many different people's groups, whereas normally people only associate with one group. And I was accepted in these different groups. Some of the groups didn't like each other, but, oh, it's Ben, he's great, let's have him in our group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because of that, if you like, the different perspectives, and you're able to hold those different perspectives without judging somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me share something that has been happening in the world at the time of recording, with something called Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
which is a perspective that many people have. Now, if you can understand that perspective and also understand the perspective of all lives matter, you can work with the people who have Black Lives Matter kind of perspective, and you can work with people who have the all lives matter perspective,
Mm-hmm.
without compromising what you internally believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
So that is that variety which will allow you to survive within any community and connect at a deeper level. Because, hey, Jason, I get what you're saying. I understand that. Now, if I want to educate you better, I'll say, Jason, have you ever thought that the Black Lives Matter community, they're not saying that all lives don't matter. They're just saying that it seems to be that many of the atrocities have occurred to Black people. That's all they're saying. They're not talking about whether, and because of the bias towards white privilege, it's locked other people out. And that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Or I could, if I wanted to get on with the All Lives Matter
crowd,
I could try and educate them a little. Sorry, if I wanted to be with the Black Lives Matter crowd, I could educate them on why people are saying all lives matter.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, or I could just say, you're right.
and then you can either get accepted on both ends, or you can get stoned from both crowds.
Depending on how you interact with them.
Yeah.
And remember, people aren't stoning you just for who you are today. They will be stoning you for how you've behaved to them in the entirety that they've known you for.
Yeah, across multiple generations, potentially.
So if you don't know someone and you act like an idiot, then they treat you like an idiot, it's because that's the only time they've known you. You know, this happens to me all the time because I really do act like an idiot, whereas they do treat me like that. But that's why it also probably why it generates that later on with them. Who are you? What was it? I always felt that one of the qualifications that would most be useful to me was the teaching English as a foreign language. So I've got a CELTA qualification, which allows me to do that. And the reason I got that qualification is because it allows me to live in any country on this planet, right? So that's why I wanted to do that. Now, while I was there was this guy who kept saying, oh, I drive this kind of car. And I'd say, that's really cool. And he'd say, what kind of car do you drive? I said, well, I drive a blue one. That was it. And then he'd say, no, what make is it? Oh, it's made out of metal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, he thought I was an idiot, and he would say various things to me during the class, which obviously showed what he thought of me. One day, he saw me driving in a blue sports car. And the next day, the next week, he apologized to me. He said, oh, I'm really sorry. I've been treating you like an idiot. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I saw you driving this amazing sports car. It's a car I've always wanted in my life. I said, oh, and I apologize for treating you like this. And I'm thinking, you're judging me on what I have, rather than who I was in the classroom, which is why I never like to tell people what I actually own.
Yeah. And So that scratches that question out of, like, I was going to say, like, what do you actually own? I'm joking. So
I own some metal, a few bricks.
Platinum, lithium.
I have no platinum. I have a few lithium in some of my mobile phones, but
yeah. So let's get into the realm of metaphysics and psychology.
I once metaphysics.
So
They're really nice to me.
I've heard, like, God, I'm just gonna have to. I'm laughing internally
Focus,
again.
Mr.
I'm
God.
laughing
Focus,
I'm
Mr.
laughing
God.
internally.
Come
God, just having to get my breath back now. So
I once met a date.
The reality goes from a joke, like birth is a joke, and you go through the whole cycle, and then you realize death is a joke. So it goes from like a joker archetype all the way around to joker archetype.
Honestly, when
What's
I
your
died,
take on this?
the day I died, I thought it was a huge joke. Really, it's hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing. Funniest thing that ever happened to me. It was funnier than when I was born. Honestly, you got to try it, Jason.
So what's your take on this? It goes from joker to joker all round.
I have no clue what you're asking me, Jason.
Well, so it's the concept of a birth is a concept because it's not really clear when the human is created. Is it at the point when the sperm touches an egg, or is it at the point where it's like 4 cells, or is it the point where it's actually heart is beating in the womb, or where the baby has come out of the mother and so on? So it's not clear, and it's also not very
I just killed a man.
Yeah, and so then
against his head.
Pull the trigger, now he's dead. And that's talking about ego death.
He didn't think it was funny. He was crying in the song until he did the Van Damme.
But no.
I don't know what.
Well, he's saying life has just begun, right? So maybe mom was crying, but he was reborn. Okay, or he found himself, he started his second life, right? Which gets us back to software engineering. I don't still know if second life is still a thing, but there's the idea of ego death, and that's the only thing that happens. Yeah. And then you kind of if you die during your life, you then actually really unlock the true blissful life that happens until you realize that, well, there's no real death, because energy is never created or destroyed. It's only transformed from one form to the other. Therefore, if we're just energetic beings, we're just really shape-shifting.
Are you a shapeshifter, Jason?
So this is how I reconcile the shape-shifting lizards, yeah? Because we all have lizard brains. We're shape-shifting from one form of energy to another. There you go, shape-shifting lizards. Done, checked out.
Oh, dear.
And
like you did last summer. You shift again. Didn't Chubby Checker write a song about that? Shift again, like it did last summer.
And
again.
You know what they say in management science? Shift happens. I thought
that was change management science.
Yes, exactly. Change management. It's I literally love that phrase when I'm working on design thinking workshops with people, and just kind of chuck it in and see if anyone's listening.
So I've never thought about whether life is a joke or death is a joke. I find it difficult when people tell me they've just lost their mother to take it seriously. I always want, I don't write it, but I always want to say, oh, where did you leave her?
Yeah.
I always want to make a joke of it, and perhaps I can't take death seriously myself. Or I just lost my grandmother, and I'd say, oh, did you leave her in the supermarket? Maybe
Yeah.
go back to where you
Yeah. Lost and
found her last.
found. Yeah. Lost
Yeah.
and found.
I
Yeah.
there's a phrase: all the world's the stage, and we are the players.
Yeah.
So I actually live my life believing everyone is watching me. So why not have the most fun?
Yeah. Yeah.
Based on that, all the world's the stage. So if all the world's the stage and I'm the player, I'm the actor, so enjoy looking at me for whatever reason. It's why I do crazy things on the underground,
Yeah.
because I believe that other people, when you look at them on the underground, they're sad, they're depressed, they're stressed, whatever. If I can do something crazy and they go back home laughing at that idiot on the underground, I've made their day. We've taken them out of their focus. Or I'll have crazy conversations. For example, Jason, if you and I were on a crowded bus or an underground, I might just say to you, you know, Jason, what was sex with that man you were with last? And I do this to my friends, and they're looking at me. Now, some of my friends, they get it, and they would just go into it.
Yeah.
And then we have this great conversation, and you see suddenly people looking, they're normally texting on their phones,
Yeah.
just kind of looking above their phones, like, who is having this conversation?
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of Australian guys do this once on the train, and they're literally like shouting at each other from two ends of the carriage. And they say like, "Oh, that lady over there, she's like amazing. Look at her dress." And they're like, purposefully over amplifying this, and she just couldn't help, but kind of note that, and she was just she was laughing. It's like, she's laughing, yeah, stop shouting so much. She's smiling about it. She might like you, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a good, amazing. They just basically lit up the entire carriage, which otherwise was like, why is this train 2 minutes late?
Very people locked in themselves and
yeah.
trying to escape the so-called rat race.
Exactly. And the train that was delayed, now suddenly this train delay turned into where everyone's like, when's this train gonna get home? Suddenly it was like, I hope this train doesn't start moving, because this is so much fun in this place.
There is a friend, and she's never let me, or she's lost it, who videoed. I don't know how it happened, but I had everyone on the carriage singing on the underground.
Yeah,
I was either a nursery song or a well-known Christmas carol. Can't remember, but it was just hilarious. And it takes people out of wherever that event happened to them. Takes them away from thinking about it.
Oh man, I'm having like a massive laugh here. This is not usually I'm usually like a lot more serious with my podcast speakers and people. So
yes, because all the world's a stage.
So,
and as all the world's a stage, I've created this energy, because right before we had this discussion, you told me you weren't real, you were AI.
Yes.
So if you are my AI, I can create this reality of the podcast to be crazy.
Yes, exactly. And so, okay, here is a question. Now, this is a serious question. Now we're getting serious.
You cannot be serious.
But
I'm by the way, you used that word facetious earlier.
Did I?
Yes,
really?
You said this word facetious.
Wow. Okay.
Well, this word facetious is a very wonderful word, because it's one of two words in the English language. Don't ask me what the other word is, which has the vowels.
What's the other word?
Don't ask me that question. I told you not to do that. So it's one of the two words that has A, E, I, O, U in alphabetical order. All 5 vowels in the English language in alphabetical order.
Wow, better remember that for future like Scrabble games.
Do you play Scrabble?
I did at one point, and I had to like uninstall the app from my phone because it was like constantly turn.
Why don't you play against people rather than against an app?
Yeah, well, it's playing against other people through an app, right? So you got like loads of games, and it's again goes back to this AI. We're interacting avatars. But so my serious question here And like, I need some sort of button here that kind of builds up the little, you know, the drumming. Here it comes.
There you go.
There you go. And the serious question, is dance about sex? And if yes, why? If no, why not?
Is dance about sex? So my response is, isn't everything about sex?
Oh, God, here he goes. Yeah, the answer is yes, it is, but
So
specifically dance.
why pick on dance, Jason?
Well, okay, I'll tell you why. Because I was recently in a dinner with a bunch of people that I knew through Facebook. Well, one guy, he was going to Peru, and he organized a bit of a gathering at a restaurant. And I met him for the first time face to face. He brought a bunch of other people, and there was a couple there, and they are dating, and they're
Were they happily
together,
coupling?
happily coupled. But also both of them are dancers, right?
Mm.
And I made this remark that said, dance is all about sex. And they went, no, it's not. No, it's not. And they went into this very serious argument that it's not about sex. And so I wanted to know from you your take on whether dance, what is the purpose of dance?
I think everything you do on this planet is about sex and connecting. Whether it's having a Zoom call, whether it's walking down the street, whether it's whatever you're doing, I think it's about sex, really, and connecting. Isn't that what we were on this planet for? To procreate?
Yeah, it's in integral theory. Ken Wilber talks about eros arising, like the whole, like it's that's why universe, the start of the universe is called Big Bang. It's like a ejaculation.
Yeah. Because they were banging. I get it.
It's just never really clear who was banging who.
Maybe the Big Bang is the orgasm.
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea.
To the small bangs, which was little orgasms on the way up to the big one.
Exactly. It's like truth.
Boom. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know a lady's orgasm works exactly like that? Like
so builds up. Yeah.
Ours don't, unfortunately.
Yeah. So so what is the greatest achievement you've ever had so far?
Have you given up on that serious question?
Yeah, I gave up. You answered it, and it's like, oh god, like it just seems so obvious. But these two younger people, they're like, no, it's not. We are telling you it's not. Stop asking us.
How old were they? How old were they?
20s.
Yeah, they're young people. You know what it is. When you were, 0 to 10 and you got into teenager, you thought, why did I behave like that in my, kiddie days? And then when you're in your 20s, you look at your teenagers and think, yeah, I was a real prat. When you're in your 30s, you're looking at your 20s thinking, you know what? When you're in your 40s, so they were only in their 20s. When you're in your 20s, you're very serious.
Yeah. At 23, I knew everything. I knew everything at 23. Gosh.
Well, it isn't even that. It's just everything is serious. But the older you get, you realize that so many things that you thought about actually don't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody recently screwed me out of 20 grand. Right? Now, if I was back in my younger days, I'd be, that doesnn't mean that.
What was the sex like?
For screwing me for 20 grand. Obviously, for that amount, I'd deliver amazing sex. Yeah. Imagine what I would have delivered for 100 grand. So when you're much younger, everything tends to be very serious. But the older you get, the more you realize it doesn't really matter. The only thing that really matters is how happy you are and what you're doing. Yeah. Are you happy? Yes or no? By happy, I mean contented, not like, I'm happy.
Yeah. And so, you're a funny guy. Biggest achievement. What's your biggest achievement in life?
Having 2 amazing kids.
Okay. How do you know they're amazing? How do you know they're amazing?
Why do you ask a question like that? Just kill the conversation, Jason. I thought you were a pro interviewer.
Is that
That's like a
like
yes,
a parent?
no question.
Is that like an outright parental bias? Amazing. Like everyone's children are amazing.
Yeah.
Like how do you know they're amazing?
From my perspective, they're self-sufficient. They, in their own way, they do it very differently, but they're really trying to help people around them and society. Uh, they they are so self-sufficient. They have an understanding of money and how to acquire it, but it isn't their end goal to just have tons of money. They really are just looking at having a wonderful life and using the finances to help them create that wonderful life and help the people around them.
Amazing. So do you subscribe that children are the biggest liability from Robert Kiyosaki?
I believe that children are our future.
Mm-hmm.
You need to treat them well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that took a millisecond to click. Yeah. So even though
listeners of this podcast, if you hear these, that's me clapping. I'm so sorry for putting that in the podcast. I'm sure if Jason doesn't edit me out saying this, then he's probably edited out those claps.
So even though on the highest level of self-realization, I know that time doesn't exist. It's space-time continuum at best. Conscious of time, what is the final statement you would like to make for all the listeners? In potentially people are going to be listening to this for hundreds.
I feel like you're ending our conversation, Jason. I feel like you're saying, "Hey, our time's up, Ben," and
we're living in that.
Talk to you anymore. What's going on here, Jason? Why don't you want to talk to me?
We are living in absolute infinity, so there is no beginning of the end. We already established that with the Joker question. So birth is a joke.
I want to come back to Robert Kiyosaki's.
Yes,
children are a liability.
Mm-hmm. Biggest liability. Biggest liability, he says.
The biggest liability.
Yes. Yeah.
You see, some cultures actually believe the opposite. They believe that children are an investment. Certainly many Asian cultures, the children end up looking after them. So, and paying and looking after their parents and grandparents. So if you've taught them and given them a great education, which is why a lot of Asian families want them to be doctors and accountants, and because these are high earners, right? Because that finance will be looking after them later on. Now, what happens if everyone believes that and they taught their children how to not only be self-sufficient, but to be overly abundant, so that if their family, their parents, their aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever, got ill and they could no longer sustain themselves, don't you think that would be an amazing investment? And you taught the children not to have massive egos and want to prove that they dominate the world and so on.
Yeah.
And they're givers. So they see you suffering, and you're not trying to leech off of them because you've taught them about social magnetism, and you've taught them how to kind of move away from psycho vampires and
and psychic vampirism.
And these people who drain you. So what a great investment that you've created.
Yeah.
For not only yourself but the world.
Yeah, and there seems to be Elon Musk.
Do you believe Robert Kiyosaki is right, Jason?
You know what? Like when my son is actually doing something of value, I think I look at Robert Kiyosaki, all the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I want to burn the books. And then when my son starts, and daughter for that matter, when they start like going like, oh, I want this, I want that, they kind of trying to psychic vampire me. Then I'm like, maybe Kiyosaki was right. So I oscillate between the two.
So when your children say, I want this, I want that, It's the universe educating you on setting boundaries to teach them how to be great people and want to work and earn their way, rather than demanding and having this kind of like what do we call it in the UK, where people just feel that they deserve stuff?
Entitlement, sense of
Yeah.
entitlement. Yeah.
So isn't when children are doing that an opportunity for you to teach them value rather than entitlement?
Yes,
And
and
that is part of your duty and your investment in them to be wonderful people. So why would you feel like that?
uh,
Not you personally,
no,
Jason.
no,
I'm
no,
just saying
no, but it's
one person.
it's a good question back, and I'm going to act as though I'm representing the entirety of the audience that listen to this. It's just we kind of lose the sense of the. It's basically like
Let's come back to this liability thing. Did them when they were little babies, did they give you lots of joy?
So I became a dad when I was very young, relatively speaking. And it was always kind of like when Ernie, my son, was born, I was like, oh my God, there's no off button for this choice that I made. Like I
That was
can't.
my fault, Jason, because I wasn't your dad and I didn't teach you how to be a great, wonderful parent, which is a lost art. No, seriously, that's a
Yeah.
lost art. In the older days, the great grandparents and grandparents, they taught their children how to be wonderful parents. We don't have that today.
Yeah, and so when Ernie was born, I had a big sense of fear and responsibility and pressure put on me to now ensure, which is sounds like again financial language, insurance, right? Ensure that he's going to be okay. So
So
yes, he gave me pleasure. Yeah.
Ernie helped you grow in your intellectual understanding of finance.
Ernie and Layla subsequently,
Yeah,
just basically they're like my two big moments of growth, enlightenment, waking up,
correct.
pulling
Well,
myself up,
yes,
dusting off whatever
yeah.
dust there was. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah,
You were just bumbling along until your children came along, and suddenly you had this responsibility, and you had to now learn about how to acquire either great relationships or finance to sustain them. You had to grow in terms of understanding how to bring up two little people who are dependent on you. You had to grow in terms of spirituality and how to deal with
yeah,
stress, how
yeah,
to understand uh, teamwork by working with either your parents or your partner in terms of looking after the children. You grew in so many different ways. Robert
exactly.
Kiyosaki
Cause that liability.
may cause that a liability, but that caused you great growth. It helped you understand finance better. It helped you grow in terms of your spirituality and dealing with issues like stress and emotional overload.
Yeah,
So give. I think it's very important for people not to put our heroes on God's status.
yeah.
So just because our heroes, by the way, Robert Kiyosaki is not one of my heroes, but I understand he's a hero for many people. That we understand they're heroes, but they aren't necessarily correct in all their statements.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so,
And I love, and one of the things I teach people is critical thinking.
yeah,
To challenge to I was going to say even myself, which is a very arrogant thing to say, to challenge anything that anybody says, including the person
yeah,
giving the courses.
exactly. And it's a kind of a skill to know how to listen to a teacher given all their kind of biases and potentially traumas and hang-ups and shortcomings and all that kind of stuff.
And ego, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, so
Okay, now you can ask me that last question, unless you want to
Yeah.
carry on
So
about the.
where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself in?
You were the first last question you asked me is what last advice you'd give to people. Now you're changing the question. The answer to your previous question is to be an oasis in the storm. Find some
Okay.
way to add value to the people around you,
Okay.
whether you being the idiot so that people laugh and they go home being happy. Do not care about your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Think how you can serve people. Be that oasis in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might just need a listener, somebody to just hear, or they might need someone to share your wisdom and give them some advice, or they may need you to be straightforward and honest to them because nobody's been honest. You cannot sing. You will never be a good singer. Right now, you need to go and find another skill where you can make money. If you want to do singing, if that's your passion, go and get lessons and grow and find an audience who likes you. But right now, you need to earn money. I don't care what you do. That kind of straightforward.
Yeah. Uh, so where do
To
you
be an
see?
oasis in the storm.
Yeah.
You
Where
must
do you?
ask me your next question.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself in 50 years time?
On this planet.
And I don't mean that geographically.
Well, I wasn't being geographical.
Who are you in 50 years time? Let's ask it that way. To take the joke full circle.
All right. So many of my family chose when they wanted to die.
Mm-hmm.
My godmother one day said to me, "Ben, it's time for me to go." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "My children have passed away. My partner's passed away. I just feel it's my time." She's a wonderful lady. She would be helping the old people, and she was like 99, but she would help the old people do their shopping. Just a wonderful lady. Just chose to go. My great aunt was the same. One day she said to me, "Ben, I want to go and be with your great uncle." She just stopped eating. That was it. So, assuming I don't get bored of being on this planet, yes, assuming that, then, and assuming because I've said to my kids, if I'm mentally not there, send me to Switzerland.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just really, I have no reason to be here. I don't wish to even be that kind of burden
Burden.
to
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Will you digitize your mind before that though?
I've already done that.
Okay, that's really okay. Cool.
So a lot of the teachings and stuff, I've sown seeds throughout different people on this planet. My kids have grown exponentially. They're much further on than I ever was, and they'll take that wisdom somewhere else. So this is not an intellectual digitization. This is a more a human digitalization. So Wayne Dyer's done the same thing, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you want to call it digitalized, well, I've done some TED Talks. Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yay me.
Yeah.
So where would I be? I would probably be just enjoying myself, maybe learning some new languages, finding out more about how other people do things. Hopefully I'll have been in a film and been a A-lister by then. Yeah.
Nice. And just a very, very final thing as well.
Oh, I love all these last questions.
Yeah, final.
Why don't we have a podcast, Jason, called Final Questions?
Yes.
Where you just ask your guests. I'm going to ask you 10 end questions. Like, just pretend this is the last question I'm going to ask you. I think that would be interesting. A series called 10 Last Questions.
You know, when designers, especially graphics designers, when they're doing their like designs, and it's always like they name things final, and then there's like a final because the
Yeah.
client asked for something else. It's like, just change that little bit there, and it's like,
Yeah.
and then there's like a final, and you learn like the more senior you get in design circles, you realize that the final has to get to seventh or eighth for it to actually be finished.
Microsoft was exactly like this. We'd have our beta version, our beta 2, our beta 3, our release candidate 1, our release candidate 2, before we even got to the actual released product.
It's like when the developer says, he's like, how far are you into the task? And they say like, oh, it's almost done. It means that they haven't even started yet.
I tell you what, so at the moment, I've got a wonderful team in the property world, and I've been running I think it's 7 or 8 property projects over the last 3 or 4 months. And every time I get to the last bit of the renovation, I'm thinking, you know what? If we did this, we can improve this a little bit, which really upsets the builders. But somewhere along the way, you have to say, okay, I know we can continually improve it. Same with writing. Yeah. But we have to have a release.
Call it a day. Yeah.
Yeah. Call it a day.
Yeah. And so to call it a day on this one, and I'd love to have you another time for another chat, and I'll make sure I prepare like really
Jason,
tricky
just
questions.
give me one moment in time.
Yeah. Is there a particular thing that you would like to share with the listeners about, to point them towards as a destination? Is it opportunities, or is there another thing? Your book?
Well, obviously I'd love lots of people to invest in our business in opportunities, but no, really, I for some bizarre reason, I believe the Social Magnetism TED Talk helps people who are going through domestic abuse, helps people understand dating better so that they find great life partners, helps people in business and integrate, get great business partners or clients. So if there's anything that I'd like out of this podcast, is for people to watch that TED Talk on social magnetism and really understand the 3 aspects that I share in there. So in a TED Talk, you only have 15 minutes, so you can't go into the depths of social magnetism, which is why I did the book and then afterwards the online program. But if you could just look at that TED Talk, there's no sales, nothing in there. I don't get any financial reward because it's on the TED platform, not mine. Please do it, because it would help you so much, and it will help you understand how to increase your social capitalism. So your social capital, not your capitalism. Your social communism, your social capitalism, your social Buddhism, your
social
Marxism,
everything.
Your social whatever.
Your social everything. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I really, really enjoyed this. I never have any real expectations, but like even if I did have like really high expectations, this like really outperformed everything that I could have expected. So this is fantastic, man. Really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Should I say thank you back?
Yeah,
well, it's
that's kind of like the social norm.
It's just you went. Well, Jason, it's been an absolute privilege being on your podcast, and all I can say, because I have the privilege of actually seeing your face as well as being on the podcast while we're talking, it's been wonderful just to see you in action.
Awesome. Thank you so much.